Should Mike Tomlin be making a decision on Matt Canada now in the middle of the season, or should they wait to the end of the year? The Steelers have some tough decisions going on offense to figure anything out. But talking about the coordinator has got the town going. We're going to talk about that discussion, what's going on with the Penguins and their 2-game losing streak. Also, what's going on with Pitt? Should they be getting rid of Keaton Slovis? All right here on the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter, joined today by Jason Mackey, both of us of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
And welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast. I'm Chris Carter. He's Jason Mackey, and we are both of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Just as this show is, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, anywhere, and especially on YouTube. If you saw this video on YouTube, like it, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We got daily content coming out on this channel, and this show comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by the Acrisure Fan Advantage and the power to project one of our Post-Gazette Steelers beat writers into your home or office using augmented reality. You can get an exclusive pregame breakdown from a Steelers expert standing in your living room. Get the latest insights on starting lineups, key matchups, and critical stats at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage. No apps or downloads, just insider access to Steelers updates at post-gazette.com/Acrisure Fan Advantage, and get a real edge on this week's action. Jason, Mike Tomlin was asked about changes wholesaling the offense. He said, I'm not there yet. And a lot of people are just like, come on, how can't you be? The Steelers offense is one of the worst in the NFL. People say it's the worst. Technically, it's not. You look at all the stats, there are groups below it, but who cares about all that? They are at the bottom of the list. But here's where I will say the counterpoint is, and I want to get your feedback on this, because I'm all with, like, if you don't believe in Matt Canada, that's totally fine. I don't think that his play structures are the problem. I think that he has a problem connecting with his quarterbacks. I think that he hasn't done that. Didn't do. I mean, but it's tough to do that with Ben Roethlisberger. He was a veteran. You're a first-year coordinator. That wasn't going to happen. But Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, at least you were hoping that he could at least build some sort of rapport with either of them. Granted, it's been a season and neither of them has played the entire season, so that can be tough. But my biggest thing about not getting rid of Matt Canada right now, is anyone that's heard me knows that I'm not on board with that decision at this point in time, is that you have a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett, who is obvious that the game is moving really fast for. He's just trying to catch up to NFL speed. And one of the worst ways to mess up his development in a rookie season, when he's just trying to get used to the speed of the NFL, how it works week to week, and how defenses are coming at him, is saying, oh, yeah, we're going to just tank out this offensive coordinator, and we're going to throw in a new one. And now this will be your third offensive coordinator in less than a year. And it'll also eventually be your fourth offensive coordinator in 2 years when we hire a new one at the end of the season. I don't think that's the best move right now. If the Steelers ended up making it, I'd be like, okay, I guess. But that ain't the answer, Sway.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying, Chris, and I probably at the end of the day agree with you. But I think a case can be made to get rid of Canada now. And I guess if we go into this argument, let me try to make the case to get rid of Canada.
Do you think?
What are we doing here? I mean,
that's the question I ask every day to Steelers fans.
Number one, the offense, I don't care about what the numbers say, is non-effective. It's non-threatening. What are we clinging to here? I think that's an important thing in any argument. Kenny Pickett, in his development, should also learn how to deal with difficult circumstances, with learning things fast, with having to adjust. All of that plays into having a new offensive coordinator. Also, I mean, I understand Kenny Pickett was a high draft pick. At the same time, like, how do I say this appropriately? He's not the king of the franchise. He doesn't get to, like, say all of these things. Ben Roethlisberger might get to say these things and have this influence, and he doesn't necessarily get that. You need to sort of deal with it, or whether I don't know if that's the right way to put it. Anyway, I would start with, do you do this, Chris? We don't need to stop recording the podcast, but like the iMessage thing drives me crazy. The ding,
it
constant
wild.
Dings. And it stops me in my tracks. But no, we're talking about Pickett. the offensive coordinator, Matt Canada, like he's clearly not the future, right? Canada's clearly not the future of the Steelers offense. Why not make it now? And at least you can have the rest of this season be worth something, because right now you're basically going to spend it goosing your way through the end of the year with an offense that Kenny Pickett is not going to retain, not going to continue to use. They're going to scrap it at the end of the year. At least they should scrap it at the end of the year, because I don't see it getting any better. And so what are these reps good for? Like, yes, you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to learn something new. It's going to happen 1,000 times over. Also, I guess the last point I would make, Chris, is, I mean, they should be in the business of winning football games, or at least putting as much toward that end as possible. Like, I cover a team in the Pirates, or I'm, soon be covering a team again full-time, whatever. I will give them this. The roster might be bare bones, but their process is geared toward winning those games. They put a lot into like matchups, scouting, preparing their players. I view this as somewhat similar. If you're trotting out an offensive coordinator who stinks and who stinks, and you're holding on to him just for the sake of avoiding change, to me that's silly.
It's not just avoiding change, though. It's about giving some sense of stability to your quarterback. And I know that you're probably saying, well, Matt Canada doesn't give you stability. The play calling hasn't been necessarily the biggest issue for the Steelers. It's been execution. Najee Harris will tell you that, with a lot of his runs, people just missing blocks in them. You look at the all-22. You see Chase Claypool is open in the middle of the field. Pat Frymuth is open in the middle of the field. I think the problem is, again, I said this up, at the beginning. You can go look at the plays and you can say, man, if Kenny Pickett makes this throw, this game is completely different. At the end of the game, the interception that he threw, Deontay Johnson has the back pylon. If he just throws it to the back of the end zone, it's a touchdown. Steelers win. We're not talking about this right now.
Yep.
That's not a play call. That's not a coordinator. That's
fair.
Execution. And this is where I do think that Matt Canada has
You're a Matt Canada apologist, Chris.
Yeah, that's totally. But this is where I think Matt Canada has the biggest issue. He has to find a way to connect with his quarterbacks. Yeah. And we don't know if he is or isn't. It doesn't look like he is. I don't know what he is like behind closed doors, because the Steelers don't give us that information. But like Todd Haley, when he came to Pittsburgh, and a lot of people hated him when he first got here, and they hated him when he left. But the one thing he did was he got to Ben Roethlisberger and he said, quarterback, I don't care how much $100 million you make, you're going to get this ball out a lot faster than you ever have. Yep. And he, by doing that, extended Ben Roethlisberger's career by however many years, because I didn't think Ben Roethlisberger, with the way that he played under Bruce Arians, who was also chased out of town, by the way, the way that he played under him, I didn't think he would last past 2014. And Ben Roethlisberger just retired last year and is developing a media career and doing all these things. Todd Haley did that, and that's where I do think at the end of the year, I am totally fine with the Steelers saying, Matt Canada, all right, thank you for your services. We're going to go get some experienced guy that's been in the NFL for years, knows how to dig into quarterbacks, and has had success at the offensive coordinator position.
Devil's advocate. Isn't part of that play calling? Like, if we're going to draw the parallel to Todd Haley and what he did with Ben Roethlisberger, like, he's giving them options. I remember the Bruce Arians offense was basically dropped back, and Ben was allowed to chuck it deep whenever he felt like, and he was getting creamed because his offensive line wasn't good enough. Then he goes to the Todd Haley offense, and it's like, 3 steps, 5 steps, the ball's coming out. You're running certain underneath routes. I mean, if they're not running certain underneath routes now, he's not theoretically calling plays that make life easier on Kenny Pickett.
Trust me, they are. Like, they're
running underneath routes?
Okay, so third down.
Where are these magical routes then? Explain that.
Third down. Kenny Pickett has a slant flat read. It's one of the most basic route combinations in football, and it's 2-on-2. It's Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool against 2 defensive backs against the Dolphins. Third down, Steelers are moving. They're trying to keep the drive alive. And the slant flat means Deontay Johnson's going to the flat to the outside. Chase Claypool's going to the slant. The job is to force these 2 cornerbacks who are in zone coverage to smartly go at cover both of them.
Yeah.
What happens is both cornerbacks went with Deontay Johnson. Chase Claypool, slant, middle of the field. Wide open, third down. If he catches it, he has a chance to hit the seam and go. And we know the best version of Chase Claypool is when you hit him and he's in stride and he can actually pick up momentum and he doesn't have to dive for a catch, because that's all we all know that's where he struggles. But you have the chance to do that. Where did Kenny Pickett go? He went where the two defenders went. He didn't hit the open man. And again, that's not to say Kenny Pickett won't get better, but this is why I'm against trying to change, put more change. Because you talked about he needs adversity. He has adversity. I wouldn't say
he needs adversity. I think he needs to deal with adversity at times. I would prefer he has none ever and succeeds. But.
Right. But Jason, my point is he has adversity. He has a young receiving core that's all kind of figuring out who they are right now. He has an offensive line that's figuring out who they are every day. He has an offense that doesn't have an identity. And the way to kind of mess up an offense that has an identity, I think, is to invite further change to it. And Aditi Kinkabwala, who covered the Steelers for years, worked for the network, does a lot of stuff, and she's been around the team. And she posed like, hey, when the Ravens in 2012, when they changed from Cam Cameron to Jim Caldwell. And right after that, they went to the Super Bowl. And I was like, that, and a lot of Steelers fans were like, see, why can't we? And I'm like, well, you got to look at context. Because in 2012, Joe Flacco was a fifth-year quarterback who was well familiar with all of his weapons. And that was a Ravens team that was 9-3 at the time and was in win-now mode. If the Steelers were in win-now mode, if Kenny Pickett was in his fifth year and this offensive line was settled and we knew who the top playmaker was on offense and we knew the best thing, I would be, yeah, change that out. Yeah. But I'm telling you, go back and look at Kenny Pickett's numbers for Pitt. Because before last year, he was not a first-round pick. He was not anyone that, no one in Pittsburgh would have been clamoring for Kenny Pickett. He threw 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions in back-to-back years. Also, that's the most Pitt thing to do, is to throw 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. But when in doing that, what happened? He kept having offensive coordinator changes. And it wasn't until he had the same coordinator for a third year that you saw him have the snap of, hey, this is where we go. I
agree with you. Turn the page now.
But here's okay. Go look at what happened with Baker Mayfield. You talk about Kenny Pickett. He's a high pick. He needed to deal with change. They had 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years for the Cleveland Browns. And Baker Mayfield was the first overall pick, the can't-miss guy, the guy they thought was going to change their franchise. And now look at him. He can't even get started with the Carolina Panthers and Christian McCaffrey when he was over there. I think that I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett would be completely destroyed, but you do not help his chances by saying, let's gut the entire offense. Let's get this out of here. Yeah. Let's work on all installs this week when we're supposed to be focusing on the next opponent. I'm not worried. Again, I'm not worried about the ego of Matt Canada. I'm not worried about his feelings or anything like that. He can, at the end of the year, again, he can go. But I'm telling you, it is not the best decision to go with a rookie quarterback who still is trying to figure out what his thing is in the NFL, what his strengths are, and saying, hey, we're going to install a whole new offense in the middle part of the season. That's what training camp is for. This game moves at a very fast pace. That is to me, that is an unsettling move that could set back his development another year or even 2.
Chris, at the end of the day, I ultimately do agree with you, and I begrudgingly do, because I want to get Canada out the door, and just I've seen enough. But I understand why it can't be done. And honestly, like, the Baker Mayfield comp is probably what does it for me, and like, I don't want to see Kenny Pickett cycle through 3 offensive coordinators, because I think that's terrible. I think it's the most important thing here in this situation for them to get this right. Like, even if you have to wait until the offseason, and this is like the adult approach, right? Like, right. The 8-year-old approach is to just say, get the heck out of here. I'm mad. I'm tired of you. But like, if you think back and think about it soberly and what you should be doing, like, Kenny Pickett should have one more offensive coordinator for like a pretty long time if you do this right. Or the guy's really successful, you go to the playoffs and somebody poaches him. But whatever. Like, to me, the chances of you getting that next hire right are better in the offseason than they are like
a lot higher
right now. And what are we doing? Like, yes, let Kenny Pickett get comfortable with something, like, even if it's a broke down 88 Volkswagen that like tops out at 65 miles an hour, like, at least let him learn to drive. And then we'll take you and go get you a new car in the off season. That's the way I look at it. It doesn't really do any good now to just say, screw it, I'm leaving this on the side of the road and I'm going to the first dealership I see. I don't like that. So again, I'm mad. I understand why all of Pittsburgh is mad. I
get it. It's not been good.
And it's just, I don't think it's what that should be looking like long term. I think they're not utilizing the weapons they have. I question what the heck is wrong with Najee Harris and or the run game. Like, how can you not run the ball better than they have ever? I realize it's not just Najee. It's not just the lineman. It's not just the play calling. There's a bunch of factors at play. But, I mean, for what they have, for what they've invested in key positions, I don't get it. It should be better than the sum of its parts right now. And it's a very bad offense.
I think part of it, again, comes down to execution. I also want to point out, when you talked about, 3 offensive coordinators and you don't want Kenny to go through that, you will give him a 3rd offensive coordinator. If you fire Mike Canada right now, then you'll bring in you'll probably just promote Mike Sullivan, who has not been a good offensive coordinator in the NFL. He has a terrible track record at that.
Right. And then you move on to somebody else in the offseason.
And so unless Kenny Pickett was drafted in late April, you're in less than a year, you will have given him a 3rd offensive coordinator, which is even faster than what happened to Baker Mayfield. Again, that doesn't doom Kenny Pickett. It just ain't the smartest move. That's my whole point there. We got to switch to Penguins because they've had a rough go at it the last couple games. We'll talk about them in just a minute here. But first, on the North Shore Drive podcast, we got to talk to you guys about Liquid Death. Y'all know about Liquid Death. Now, I got to say, normally you see me with a Liquid Death can. It looks like a Miller Lite can. It's a tall boy. I'm all out of them. You know why? Because I drank them all. And that's why you should go get Liquid Death, because it's awesome tasting water. It's just mountain spring water in a can instead of a bottle. It's easier to chill. And here's a great thing, too. If you're a tailgater, and I know it's starting to get into chillier seasons of tailgating, it's a great option for tailgating if you just want a reprieve of water, because the cans, they're easy to recycle. That's why they call it Liquid Death, because it's murdering your thirst and murdering plastic pollution. It's easy to recycle, and it's easy to package. It tastes great coming out of a can. It's fresher. It's awesome. And when I put it in the fridge or you put it in a cooler, it's going to come out even colder as spring water. So go get yourself some Liquid Death right now. They got those tall boy cans out there, and 10% of profits from every can sold go to fighting plastic pollution on our planet. So go get Liquid Death that murders your thirst. You can get Liquid Death at your local Target, your 7-Eleven, your county fair, anywhere. But especially if you want to go find a Liquid Death retailer near you, go to their store located at liquiddeath.com/shore. That's liquiddeath.com/shore. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Jason Mackey. We're the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and we're continuing our trek here through Pittsburgh sports on a Wednesday. And, the Penguins were the one bright spot to start the season. They started the season 4-1. Everyone was like, finally! Pitt football didn't deliver. The Steelers are struggling. The Pirates were the Pirates. Everything. Finally, we got some winning. We got some winning sports right here. And then they have 2 losses to the Flames and the Oilers. That multiple goals in each situation. And there's
bad, Chris. Bad.
And I want to ask you, but how bad? Because here's the thing: hockey season's really long, right? Like this, you're gonna have your nights where you just ain't yourself. But is this like alarmingly bad, or just like a, hey guys, let's check something here bad?
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like, I don't want to say it's alarmingly bad, because that sounds silly sitting here on October 26th, and the season, like you said, goes on for like another 17 months.
And they're tied for first in the Metropolitan Division right now still,
right,
even with those.
But I guarantee you, last night, like I was watching the Flames game, and the way they started in the first period, I mean, it was awful, Chris. I think they had 2 shots as the period was winding. They got a late flurry, but I mean, it was like 20-2 at some point like that.
That's
there was
alarming.
a stretch where the Oilers and the Flames had scored 8 consecutive goals on the Penguins. It just literally nothing was going right. That's not okay. It's just not. I mean, those are 2 of the best teams in the Western Conference. That's the style of hockey the Penguins are going to have to. I mean, physical teams, skilled teams, that's sort of where the NHL is going. Like, nobody is any one of one thing. When the Penguins won a couple of years ago, they were a tremendously skilled team. They weren't necessarily the most physical, and they were just faster than everybody else. Teams are sort of sacrificing speed a little bit and getting more physicality. The Penguins are getting knocked off pucks. They're losing battles. They're careless with the puck, especially on the power play. So, like, Mike Sullivan had to have just flipped out. Just had to. Like, the guy, you could tell, like, there's smoke coming out of his ears on the bench. That stuff's not okay. Now, do I think that's the type of team the Penguins are going to be when it's all said and done? Of course not. I think they're much better than that. I think they're more of the team that we saw through the first 4 games than less of the team we've seen the past 2 nights. But you can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. Whether it's football, whether it's baseball, whether it's hockey, like, your team misperforms or underperforms that badly. I mean, you're wrong to pretend that something isn't going on. So, I mean, they need to address it. I feel like, I haven't loved what I've seen from Jeff Petrie. I think I probably said last week, I've been really encouraged by his play. And that was also accurate at the time. And so, I mean, you need to figure out which one it is. With him, Chris Letang's been sort of the same way. Some of their depth forwards, I've liked Sam Poulin. So, like last night, he made his NHL debut and was quite good. The top six has been productive at times and wildly unpredictable at other times. So, anyway, all of which is to say that I'm not hitching my wagon to how they've performed the past 2 games, but I don't want to ignore it either because it was really bad.
How much of this stems from their special teams play? Because you look at their power play. It's not terrible. It ranks like I think 12th in power play scoring in the league. But at the same time, when you have the players that you do, I feel like the Penguins should be top 5 in power plays in their effectiveness. But what's really the bad sign, or what's really concerning is that this is the time when you take advantage of some situations. This is when you're able to get some stops. And as I understand it, they do have one of the worst penalty kill units in the NHL right now. That's as far as percentage wise, that's not where you want to be if you're the Penguins. How much of this gets fixed if they're able to just kind of work those things out? Because those can lead to quick points. Those can lead to those turnover situations, some of those giveaways and takeaways. And it seems like sometimes even when the Penguins are on the power play, they're giving up pressure on themselves because they're having some of those giveaways, and it ruins the possession and gives the other team scoring opportunities.
Yep, no doubt. And you saw it last night. The Penguins had a power play. I forget who got the goal. I'm blanking on it, but like the penalty expires a couple seconds later, they're in poor position. Calgary scores. You've seen stuff like that where it's like right after a penalty. But you asked originally how big are the special teams? Honestly, a lot, and a lot more for the Penguins than for other teams based on how they spend their salary dollars. Like look at who their star players are and who they're spending money on. I mean, and like a lot of NHL teams, to be fair, but I mean, Letang, Crosby, Malkin, Ricard Raquel, not Jeff Carter in the top, but Brian Rust, Jake Gensel. Like these are all top power plays. A few of them might play on the PK, but you need those guys to be great. You need the power play to be productive. Last season was sort of a confounding one. And I remember writing the story earlier in the year where like they generated a lot of shots, a lot of opportunities. Like the process was good. The puck didn't go in the back of the net. Their conversion rate was like 19th or 20th. And that's sort of tough to, how do you just automatically score? I think of people in baseball, you say like throw strikes. What the heck do you think I'm trying to do? I'm trying to not put the puck in the back of the net, but you need to put the puck in the back of the net. It's the other side of the argument. So anyway, and they've also had a lot of changes on their penalty kill. Like if there's one area of the team, they basically, run a lot back, but the one area that has seen some new guys in there is the PK. So, I mean, I think that stuff generally irons out with time, but a lot of their success or failure it's linked to this stuff, just because it has to be. Their best players, their most important players are tied to these units. And when those units are good, the Penguins are good. When they stink, the Penguins stink. It's not everything, but it's certainly something.
I think that right now that's the thing that you look at. And again, I said this before the season, man, like I ain't sweating the Penguins if they suffer. I mean, 2 of their Stanley Cups came when they had some of the worst first half starts, in the NHL at the time, right? And they were able to turn it around. Now, I will say this, you want to see, chemistry from your guys early because, when you have, Crosby, Malkin, those guys, there shouldn't be any question. Like for example, the Steelers offense right now, they're looking for chemistry because they don't know who each other are. Kenny Pickett just got there. Najee Harrison is his second year. Dan Moore, Kevin Dotson, Mason Cole, James Daniels, and Chukuma Okorafor, they're learning each other. There's a lot of new guys to that process. The Penguins don't have that issue. Yep. This should be the time they get out in front, be the front runners. And again, I want to be clear. Again, they lead the Metropolitan Division. They're tied at the top right now, with Carolina. But at the same time, there are some alarming things that you're like, hey, don't let this spiral out of control. What is the thing that you think that Mike Sullivan can do right now, or that he's going to be able to do to kind of get this team to say, hey guys, let's stop the fall right here. Let's turn it around.
Scare them. Their kids scare them from Bull Durham. No, I mean that's honestly what it is. Like we can talk about the penalty kill, the power play, all that stuff's important, Chris. I mean, with the Penguins, it is like, what's the way I'd put it? Care with the puck. I was looking for a fun word there, but like, responsibility, diligence is a word that Sullivan likes to use. basically don't be so cavalier. Don't make a pass. You're like, it may work, may not. I don't really care. Oh, this will look great if I do it. The Penguins for years have done stuff like that. Like they think they're the Harlem Globetrotters. And that's the total antithesis of what Mike Sullivan wants to be about. Like incrementally move the puck. Be careful with it. At the blue line, don't make risky decisions. Dump it in, work to get it back. Not play a boring game, but it's like a blue collar game. It's a grind game with elements of skill and finish. So like you dump the puck in, you work to get it back, and there's probably going to be a skilled play in there, but you can't just, I'm going to dangle around this guy and then I'm going to go around this guy and it's all going to work out just fine. It doesn't matter if anybody's covering for me. I'm jumping into the play. Like they've done that too much. And they just need to realize like there are consequences to playing like that. We're seeing them the past 2 nights, especially when you play against really good teams. You play against Arizona, like that doesn't matter. You play like Columbus, you can kind of get away with playing 40 minutes, which is what they did. You play that way against Edmonton and Calgary, and you're going to get crushed, and they did. So I mean, that's the concerning part for me, Chris, and that's the most easily fixed one, is to just be more responsible in some of your decision making.
We'll see how quick Mike Sullivan gets them turned around. He's another one of those coaches that I give them the credence to figure things out, even if he has it down. Yeah, I think that guy knows what he's doing when he's coaching a hockey team. We're gonna switch it up. We're gonna talk some Pitt football because there's a lot of questions about Pat Narduzzi sticking with Keaton Slovis. We'll talk about that in just a minute here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, got to talk to you guys about Yinzers in the Berg, one of our great sponsors and the best place to go get your Pittsburgh sports apparel. With the Steelers and the Penguins both up and running right now, there's no better time to get your black and gold gear. And the best place to do it is at Yinzers in the Berg. You can find them in 2 places in Pittsburgh, both in the Strip District. Awesome locations for you to go find. You love Kenny Pickett, they got Kenny Pickett gear. If you love Sidney Crosby, they got Sidney Crosby gear. If you're in TJ Watt, his return's coming, they got TJ Watt gear. All of that can be found at Yinzers in the Berg. And if you're not in Pittsburgh, guess what? They got you too, because they got their website, yinzerspgh.com. That's always rolling out new material, new accessories, new apparel, everything, merchandise that you can want Pittsburgh sports. So again, go to their 2 legendary shops in the Strip District, plus their growing online store at yinzerspgh.com. Again, that's yinzerspgh.com to find all your Pittsburgh sports apparel. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Jason Mackey. I want to talk to you about some Pitt. And I know this is my beat, Jason, but I think everyone can kind of see what's going on with Pitt right now. When you look at their games and you're just like, man, things are rough. And you went to, did you go to both games or one game?
I think I got to the WVU game.
Yeah, the backyard brawl. Well,
yeah.
That was honestly the best version of Keaton Slovis we saw.
Really?
And it was right. And he said really, because it wasn't exactly great. But he did throw a game-tying touchdown, and there was some functionality there. But now it looks like he's seeing ghosts, and when you look at both the ACC losses, it's tough to put Tennessee on him because Tennessee's looking like one of the best teams in the country, and Kenny Pickett, Keaton Slovis got hurt, right before halftime there, and that Nick Patty had to come in, and he was playing on one leg, and still then the Panthers forced overtime in that one, but losing to Georgia Tech. Losing to whoever they lost this past week. It's just they're all starting to make Louisville. They're all starting to melt, those two melt together so much. Losing those 2 teams was unacceptable. And you can look at both games and say that that's not on the defense. The defense kept the Panthers in the game. They found ways to get key stops. Like, sure, there's moments they could have done better, but they weren't completely unacceptable. And you look at the Panthers offense and you say, man, Keaton Slovis, against Georgia Tech, he had a lot of garbage time points. That's kind of what that stuck with there. And then against Louisville, just never got going. And you see that, like, everyone's wondering, like, hey, what's the harm in going with another guy there? And I think what Pat Narduzzi is weighing, and he won't ever say this because Pat Narduzzi does not tell us real things that are going on in his mind. But I think what he's weighing is, hey, like, I got this transfer quarterback in here, and we're probably going to need to either keep him or get another transfer quarterback next year.
Yep.
I can't just abandon him at the first sign of trouble, because then no one will want to come here to play quarterback. But here's my thing, Jason. It's like, look, it'd be one thing if Keaton was a big structured piece of Pitt football, but he's in a situation where he's seeing ghosts. I think sometimes you may need to let him step back, reassess how he's playing, and give a shot to a Nick Patty, to a Nate Yarnell, to say, hey, you got this power, this full souped up running game. The Pitt has a foundation. Like compared to the Steelers, the Pitt had the most historic rushing performance earlier this year in Israel Abanikanda. They've got Rodney Hammond back. They've got things to lean on where the Steelers don't. This is where I think Kedon Slovis, even if you don't think that if you want to bring him back at some point this season, that might be fine. But right now, he is seeing ghosts, and it's killing the Panthers' chances.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Chris. I look at precedent and maintaining precedent and some import there.
Yeah.
You hit on it. If you bench Kedon Slovis, what message does that send to other transfer portal quarterbacks that Pitt tries to bring in? I look at it from a Pirates perspective. Like they bring in free agents and it's obviously not a desirable place to play. One of the things people are going to look at is how am I used? Tyler Anderson, Jose Quintana, like they did right by those guys by saying you're going to get the ball and you're going to pitch every fifth day. Now, if they would have like cut bait on one of those guys while they went through struggles, other teams are going to notice that. And so if you cut bait on Kedon Slovis right now, other college football teams are going to notice that. Now, okay, the Pitt Panthers also aren't like Kedon Slovis's personal playground. Like everything doesn't revolve around him the same way as I said earlier in the podcast. Everything doesn't revolve around Kenny Pickett. I don't care who you are. I would maybe look to two quarterback system, give other guys opportunity. Like I certainly don't have an issue if he wants to sprinkle in some Nick Patty or Nate Yarnell and get a little creative. Like, and you could say to Kedon, you could say to anybody questioning it, like, look, he has not played well enough to lock down the job by himself. We're trying to win football games. Like that's not a crime to do that. But you can be judged if you sit him down in perpetuity for the rest of the season. You can be judged by not giving this guy enough of a chance, or you made an irrational. I don't know. I'm just trying to think like the other side, but I would start looking under other rocks, giving other guys opportunities. And then if that sparks something in Kedon Slovis, great. Then everybody's better for it. But I wouldn't go all the way there. I'd just go half.
I hear you on that. And I'm with you on the halfway measure. It's like, hey, Kedon, we're going to try something else right now. We want you to be the man, but you're not the man right now. And I think that should have been the call during Louisville. I mean, you could see that, especially like in the early part of the second half, it's just he didn't have it. He was making poor decisions. He was rushing everything. And again, for Frank Cignetti Jr.'s sake, a lot of people say, oh, he doesn't know on the interception that he threw at the early part of the game, Daniel Carter's wide open in the flat. And even Konate Mumfield broke to the end zone. There's no safety, in the end zone. If Kedon Slovis leads it to the back pylon, maybe Mumfield comes down with it. But he had a wide open Daniel Carter on a first down. The second interception he threw was also on a first down and just completely unnecessary for him to throw, and ruined two scoring drives where if they get either one, they probably win this game. So that's concerning. And I think this ties back to where Pitt's at this year, because they're 1-2 in the conference right now. They're about to play North Carolina on their homecoming weekend at Chapel Hill. This is going to be tough because now they have a freshman sensation quarterback in Drake May. They're playing, and North Carolina's 3-0. If you lose this game, you are out of the ACC Coastal. You'll be 3 games back, and really 4 games back, because North Carolina will have the tiebreaker. There's no making up that ground at any point in time. If you win this game, you give yourself a chance. But I think that's the biggest thing, is that Pitt has to give itself a chance. If in this game you see Kedon Slovis doesn't have it, you have to put it on the line, because this year was supposed to be the year that you proved, hey, last year wasn't a fluke. It wasn't just Kenny Pickett. It wasn't just Jordan Addison. There's strength to this program. And to be fair, I think this team has a lot of talent. I think Kalijah Kancey is one of the best defensive tackles in the country. I think Hava Baldonado, Desmond Alexander, John Morgan, and they just got back Deion Hayes. They're a heck of a defensive end group. I think that Gavin Bartholomew can be one of the best tight ends in the country. I think Jared Wayne's a very good wide receiver. I think Israel Abanikanda may be the best running back in college football right now. And then you got Eric Hallett, who's a semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award. You have MJ Devonshire, who's been playing well in the secondary. You Savasi Dennis, who I think is going to go by day 2 in the NFL draft. You have a lot of talent on this roster, but it can all be spoiled by poor quarterback play. And even if that means you have to get a guy who's super conservative like Nate Yarnell, and he throws 15 passes in a game, but he gives you a solid 9 reps out of those 15 passes, and you're just relying on the run game and he doesn't kill you, I think it's worth that look. But again, if you're going into this game and you think, hey, it might have something for you, okay, fine. But if in the middle of this game you're contending and he's not any part of your contending, I think they got to make a decision, because this game is for the season right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Chris. And you're not going to replicate the magic that they saw last season. There's just no way. But you also don't want to dive back into 6-6 territory.
Yeah.
You just don't. I mean, it's what they created last season was outstanding, and I feel like it broke the mold for recent Pitt teams. Even predating Narduzzi. So
yeah,
you want to continue to win. You want to get to a bowl game that is not the BBVA Compass Bowl. I don't think they're going to wind up there. I don't think they have the talent. I think they have better talent, I should say, than a team that winds up there. But, quarterback play's got to be better. A lot of play has to be better. And this is a big game for them this weekend.
Indeed it is. Noah Howells will be there covering it. I'll be here in Pittsburgh giving you guys updates. Thanks again, Jason Mackey, for joining the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's North Shore Drive podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. For Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we got our Get You Ready for the Week with Brian Batko. We'll see you there on the North Shore Drive podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down below in the description.